Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Atomic Podcast. And today, I am very excited uh, to uh, uh, to be talking with uh, Shahar Keinan, and I a little bit hesitate because there's so much that she does as a scientist, and to try to get out of my expressions all the things and contributions she's bringing to the field of quantum is pretty daunting. She is one of the founders of Polaris. Polaris is a company she's going to give some details to, but I think what I'm particularly fascinated with is the way in which she's using quantum, because quantum in this case has a very specific area in drug discovery and also a very particular efficacy that we really need to see go forward as a field in drug discovery, but also in quantum in a number of different areas. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Shahar, and please introduce yourself and give us a sense of your background.
Sure, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm a computational chemist by training. I did my PhD at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, came to the US to study materials, and then looked at drug design. Was always interested in looking and finding the best molecules in chemical spaces. We thought they were big then, millions of molecules, then billions of molecules, and now looking at really big chemical spaces. But really thinking about the problem from a different point of view and how you find the best answers.
And so, with that particular work, it has led you. And why did it lead you to think of quantum as a possibility to capture that space differently?
So about 4 years ago, Bill Shipman, Polaris co-founder, and myself sat down and tried to figure out what we want to do when we grow up. It was clear to us that the area of drug design is something that we are interested in, that we think can be relevant to us. But also we had some understanding of what works and what doesn't work. And what we understood then is that it's not enough to design molecules that will bind to a certain pocket for a protein. They must have the right properties to become a drug, which is much more complex set of properties than what you need just for something that binds to a protein, right? Drug needs to be something that you can synthesize, something that is soluble. You have criteria whether or not you want it in the brain or never to go into the brain, how much permeability from the stomach into the body, all of those kind of things that it's not enough that your molecules have the biological activity you want. It must have a whole set of other properties around it that will make it a drug and make it easier to reach to clinical trials and have a higher chances of success in passing the clinical trials. And it became clear to us that we need some new technology to do that. So we looked at other technologies as well, but quantum annealing specifically, which is something that attracted us because we have been thinking about drug design not as a design problem, but as an optimization problem, which is a different way of thinking of those problems. A design is, I have something and let me add something to it and see if it's working or not. An optimization problem is, let's look at very large number of solutions and find the best one, the most optimized one, right? And the moment that we said, okay, we're not interested in design, we're interested in solving an optimization problem, then quantum annealing is one of the first things that you would think of, especially at that time 4 years ago. And that's how we started to think about it. It took a long time. I'm telling it as a very logical number of steps. Of course, it never is as simple as that. And there were a lot of false starts, a lot of things that we've tried that didn't work, and a lot of things that we tried that worked very well. And we were so suspicious of it, and we had to go and check it out, of course. But it is where we started, and we're very proud right now, I think, of what came out of that and of the system, the automated system that we have now, which is a SaaS product, right? So other people can use it as well. So yeah.
So one of the things that you mentioned here is understanding the sort of dimensionality of those molecules, the properties, and how those properties get taken up by the body. You're talking not just properties within a generalized body, but are you also talking about, you know, specific interactions with more kind of personalized care or personalized medicine, precision medicine, or are you talking in a more generalized sense?
So I think we can separate this almost to two different buckets. The first bucket is when you're designing a molecule for a certain disease, then you're interested in it to be good for a very broad definition of safety. So it's not personalized. You want it to be for this kind of safety and toxicity, you want this to be as broad dose definition as you can. However, using quantum, you can say things that before were not reasonable to do. So if you have a disease that is with a very small patient population, okay, then before developing drugs for such a small patient population is something that is not financially viable, right? Clinical trials are expensive. Preparing those drugs is expensive. But if you are using quantum, then you can start to think about the smaller patient populations because the drug design itself is faster. The molecules that you get are better. So the process is shorter, is less failures. And then thinking about precision medicine and working with very narrow range of biologies. So a single mutation that is maybe relevant again for a small number of patients, but you can still target that one specifically. And I think that's one of the things that really interest me and drew me to this is the ability to design molecules, design drugs for very large number of diseases and disease conditions, and start to think about personalized medicine.
And so you're running kind of parallel to some of the needs that pharma is exploring, which are rare diseases, you know, orphan drugs, be able to make the trial itself more efficient, cost effective, and more targeted. So are you finding that some of these areas of pharma the pharma takes a long time to change sometimes, as we know. But
Indeed, indeed.
so the idea of some of the decision makers in pharma, they can be having these discussions, but are they taking action and do they see the value of your approach? Are they beginning to see the value of your approach?
I think the second sentence is better here. They are beginning to see the values of those approaches. We are slowly seeing how what we are saying, which is use a much larger chemical space. Look at 10 to the power of 30 molecules. You will find better molecules there. This is something that slowly permeates pharma. And we can see it. We can also slowly see how people that or organizations that before were was very difficult for us as a small biotech company, was very difficult for us to get into. Now it's becoming more and more easier for us to get into. And we also have pharma companies come to us and say, can we try it? Can we test it? Show us your results so that we can try it as well. I think moving from, and this was a business decision, moving from doing fee-for-service kind of projects to a SaaS product where other people can use it, increase the availability of that technology, but also cats like to touch things, right? They like to try things. They want to, to get their hands on something and do it. And that's something that we see a lot of excitement in the industry right now.
That's terrific. And I think these shared tools and platforms are really going to help innovation and help people across different domains that need to collaborate on a SaaS platform. So I think it's really kind of the way to go. I wanted to ask you, kind of going back to that properties question, um,
Huh?
is where have you seen properties left out, properties that were not captured that contributed to a molecule not either being stable enough or accurate in what you originally captured. In other words, um, if you're not capturing the kind of chemical space you're describing, you're not really surfacing the kind of properties that you don't see those early enough. Um, and what are some properties that you see are just not made visible, not calculated um, in, I'll say, the more traditional and classical?
Interestingly, we have a new white paper coming. Okay, and that white paper is a known drug based on a known drug, something called sorafenib, which is relevant for cancer. And there's the company that developed sorafenib. There were several of those pharmas that bought and sold that specific asset. But sorafenib is a quite a large molecule, and you can imagine that when the chemist in the original company that designed sorafenib, what they've done is when they wrote the patent on sorafenib, is that they looked around and did, okay, what happened if we change this? What happened if we change this? What happened if we change that? Okay, so they've done all of that work just to look at sorafenib and the IP, the intellectual property around it. Now, of course, a couple of years later, came people from other companies and did exactly the same thing and found all the holes in the original patent. But it took them a long time to find all of those holes, and different groups found different holes, and then they wrote their own patents. Now come this Polaris Quantum Biotech company, and we look around sorafenib and we start to find those molecules. So we rediscover those molecules that previously people worked very hard to discover those. But because we look at such a large chemical space, we found those molecules that are adjacent to sorafenib. And I'm sure that the original inventor of sorafenib would have been very happy to use our quad system and find all of those holes in their patents and close those holes before their competitors found all of those holes. And so when we because we look at such a large chemical space, because we have no bias, or that system doesn't have any bias, we can find those holes in the IP. We can make suggestions for other things that you need to test, so you can add them to your patent and protect yourself better. Okay, we can also, if you want to look at somebody else's patent and figure out how to attack that one, we can give you some ideas about that. And again, all of that is because we just look at more molecules at a much larger chemical space. The accuracy of our calculation is quite similar to other methods, but the number of molecules that we can look at, that's where the advantage is. The advantage is it's simply at looking at more solutions and finding the best one, right? Optimization.
And so, do you find in the optimization process uh, a real challenge with compute or runtime with your models, or a large chemical space itself or biological space? There's a lot of compute that has to go into that. So I'm just wondering kind of how you tackle that challenge.
Yeah, that's why we use the quantum annealer, because we can look at those kind of chemical spaces. We done some testing, definitely not very I'm not going to say extensive, but we've done some testing, and we see that trying to run those systems on CPUs, maybe even GPUs, it takes so long that you just cannot do it. You cannot look at such large chemical spaces on systems that are classical. You must use a different method, like quantum annealing.
Could you maybe, for our audience, give perhaps another, not another, but a more detailed description of what quantum annealing is?
Yeah, so sure. So a quantum computer is a computer that uses quantum phenomena to solve problems. And they are very good at solving some problems. Of course, crypto and solving the Shor algorithm, but they're also very good at some other algorithms. And one type of a quantum computer is something called quantum annealer. And quantum annealers are systems that are started at, sorry, let's go back one. So a quantum computer operates at a very low temperatures, very close to zero. And the quantum annealer starts at a bit of a higher temperature, 4. Okay, we're not talking about room temperature, but and then you start your system, and then it's made out of quantum bits, and they're at high temperature, so they can sample all of the possible solutions. Okay, so they can be up, they can be down, they can be in between, they can move all over the place. Now you start your system, they are all exactly the same. And then you start including your problem and your constraints. The way they implement that is by using electromagnetic waves. That's how they include those changes to the system. And then they slowly start to cool the system back to zero. Now they're doing it in a slow way. And the system, the things that can choose between up and down and up and down, they go up and down and up and down until they find the global minima or the global maximum. So that's, and they stay there. And slowly the whole system stabilized to the ground state, to this when they reach zero, they reach the ground state, which is the low energy state, and that should be your answer, the right answer for you. Annealing systems cannot solve all of quantum computers' problems. They can only solve optimization problems. That's the only problems they can solve. That's why we use it. We think it's very useful for us. But for example, you cannot use it to solve the Shor algorithm, for example, or other things. You can only solve some problems. And all of those problems belong to the same family of kind of questions, which are optimization problems.
And when you operate, are you finding yourself in I'll say an environmental challenge when you're using your quantum compute? Is there limitations of how you're doing your computing in terms of any kind of vibration, any kind of temperature? I'm just thinking because I know quantum computers are quite finicky.
Yeah, so we are using a D-Wave system, the D-Wave annealer, Advantage it's called. So for us, we use an API, so we use it in the cloud, we send our problems and we get back. It is a system, of course, that require quite a lot of upkeep and maintenance, and they are very good at telling us when things work and when they don't work. They are also working to increase the size of their system, so it's always very exciting to look at how much bigger they can get and how much bigger our systems can be in those kind of cases.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And another question, your company, as your company is growing, in what direction is the company growing? Maybe you could talk about some of the problems you're trying to solve that's emerging, or the directions you feel that you're heading over the next 2 to 5 years.
Sure. So we are hoping that fully quantum computers are going to become more and more accessible in the next 2 to 5 years. And we will be there, we will be ready to use those computers to do other things, not just solve optimization problems. We just received a DARPA grant in their impact, ARC impact program that help us start developing the programs, the codes, so that we will be ready when bigger, fully quantum computers are ready. That's one way. We also are looking to make our systems more accessible so that more customers and more groups will be able to work on those systems. And we are looking for more challenging problems to solve. One of the problems that we will probably tackle in the next 6 months is going to be designing peptides and biological molecules that can be used in agriculture. So they are biodegradable. So that's one of the problems that we are going to try and solve in the next 6 months.
Oh, that would be terrific. To do that kind of work in agriculture also, it really helps us on the climate side.
Yes, very much so.
And have you done work or peptide work to, say, cross the blood-brain barrier, or anything like that?
That's really complicated. There are ways of doing that. Of course, there are peptides that cross the blood-brain barrier, but in many cases, these are peptides that have a protein that shuttles them in and
Hmm.
out. So that's
That's
much
right.
more complicated. We have not looked at it much more than that. It
Hmm.
is doable, but it is very difficult. It is very difficult.
Yes, it is. It is. And of course, shuttling across the BBB um, therapies, instead of just dosing the entire body.
Yep.
Um, so you're not getting, liver failure or other really severe problems.
Yeah,
Would be a huge breakthrough.
completely. Yeah.
Yeah. But we need your technology. We need you and your team to help us on the climate side too. So we need quantum in so many different ways. You know. So one of the things that other kind of propositions, I should say, for quantum, and that I hear a lot is that quantum is, as you've already said, does not solve all problems, and yet I think people do have a sense that it's a pure compute play.
Yep.
Uh, and it's not a pure compute play. Um, and I think this conversation's in terms of annealing and defining a huge chemical space, biological space as well, is one of the things that machine learning has attempted to do, but cannot do it on this level. I've seen this in material science as well. Large parameter space that we need to capture, and it takes us a very long time to do that if we're producing, say, nanomaterials. Um, my question really is this: is that are you really looking across biology and materials, or are you squarely in the molecular?
So right now we are squarely in molecular, but probably, after we conquer pharma and biotech, we will go to agricultural, and then we will go to materials. I started part of my research has been into material science, nonlinear optics, and other kinds of molecular materials, but other materials as well. So that's something that I completely understand, and I think there are so many needs there. But yeah, we'll start. Right now we're doing small molecules. We'll add peptides and biological molecules, and then go from there.
Awesome, awesome. Uh, a question for you, maybe for some of the scientists that are coming through and leaving their postdocs or planning to take one, is would you suggest that this area of quantum annealing in particular, but drug discovery, material discovery, are exciting areas for new researchers coming through and wanting to make a mark for themselves?
Yes, definitely. It's a really interesting area. You can make your mark there. It's also an area that people are very supportive of one another. Young scientists that want to talk with more mature scientists can do that. There's a lot of support there for people who are not the classical type of scientist, but people who are more diverse. And we are interested in people from many backgrounds, right? You don't have to come from a only physics background or only computer science background. You can reach the area of quantum computing from many backgrounds. And because it's a new area that people are still learning, you can learn it yourself. There's a lot of classes online that you can learn and gain the language, gain the knowledge, and start doing things there. So highly recommend.
That's great, and that's certainly a huge sensibility of the podcast and myself is people that cross over and they don't have the classical biography of a scientist, and also the work they're doing reaches across different domains. So I'm very happy that you've sent this message to younger researchers that jump aboard. There's a lot of room for growth.
Yeah, come over.
Join the party. Join the party.
Yeah,
That's great.
it's a really you know, I'm going around and talking with conferences and stuff. It's a really nice group of people, very supportive. A lot of it at different levels of understanding. So you can start as a high school student knowledge and slowly gain your knowledge all the way to a more mature level.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. Um, what may I ask in terms of people that would want to contact you and Polaris? What would be a great way for them to contact you?
So LinkedIn is probably the best way. If they want, they can go to Polaris website. There's an info email there that they can send to us. But also connect with me on LinkedIn
Okay,
or with Polaris on LinkedIn. We keep both of these these channels open, and we try to answer when people contact us.
that sounds fantastic. And of course, you know, this discussion will be on YouTube, and so people will find you there, and anyone that comes to me, I'll bounce to you.
Thank you.
So
Looking
yeah,
forward.
so you're creating a whole new kind of frontier, and I super appreciate that you're open, you're encouraging the next generation of scientists, and you're doing an important work.